G'day, Keithy here. Thanks for joining me again. Bit of garage action here. It's a bit of an overcast day, a little bit rainy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this ute going so that I can put the Range Rover in and do what I've got to do today, which, if you've seen the title, is the gasket for the right-hand exhaust manifold. So it's going to be a fun little job. Now, usually when you do this kind of job, you'll find that you get those little heat shields that go over the manifold start to play up, and the little nuts, you can never get them off. So that's going to be the first objective, to get that off in order to work out what exactly is going wrong, whether it's a gasket, whether there's a crack in the exhaust manifold. So we'll work that out, but in order to get the ute out, I need to chuck it on the charger. It's been sitting for a bit and hasn't done anything, so unfortunately the battery's flat on that. So give him a little charge at, that's stage one, and then I can get the Range Rover in.
We couldn't go without checking this out.
Tearing up tires now. G'day, Keithy here. G'day, Keithy here. G'day, Keithy here. Alright, so the ute is out and she's getting a bit of charge now, which is good. So I can get the Range Rover into the garage and we can have a bit of a go here. So the first thing we need to do, and I didn't want to drive this thing too much because I didn't want to get it too hot, I've got to get these little screws out of here of this heat shield. So there's one up the back, one here, and one down there. Now these are notorious for being a pain in the ass to get out, so fingers crossed I can get them out without too much trouble. Got it out. Okay, so here is the this is the heat shield that goes on the exhaust. It's in good nick. All of the bolts, the nuts came out very easily on this. You can see here I just had to bend this in a little section here in order to get it out. That is no biggie, but what I wanted to show you here is this right at the end. So this is down near where the flange is, where the exhaust headers meet the tailpipe, just before the oxygen sensors. Now you can see here that this is residue from the exhaust. So I've had a leak, which is fair enough. I actually knew that I did have a leak. It was only a very, very faint leak, but I could hear it. And you can see this is exhaust gas here that's come out of the exhaust pipe and onto this. So this is a very good telltale if you're going to do this job for yourself. Just looking up here where the headers come out of the block of the head, there's no residue at all up here, exhaust residue that is, none whatsoever. So I'm happy that the headers right up to the head, I haven't got any holes or anything like that, but down here close to the flange is where I've got a hole. So let's get underneath and we'll have a look now and see if there's anything visible down there. Okay, so I apologize for any really dodgy shaking at the moment. I'll try and get you where you can actually see under here, because I have to use a torch while I film this, but you can see there the welding. It looks a little bit dodgy on this here. This is at the bottom of a header, so there's where the tailpipe meets the headers. Now the welds down here look a little bit ordinary. I'll move the torch again. So that's underneath now. Those welds actually look like they were spitting, so I don't know whether this has been repaired in the past and someone's done a bit of a dodgy weld up job to try and make that all look good. But look at those welds, they're terrible. And now I can't weld, but I could tell you now I could weld better than that. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to have to pull these headers out in order to repair those welds there. So I've got a gasket for the headers to go onto the manifold, and I've also got one for here, so that's okay. But now I'm going to have to pull this out, and that's not a job that I can do today because I need this car to be running. Unfortunately, this is the joy of my life, needing the car to be running all the time. So it took me about an hour to get the actual heat shield off this here. A lot of people have said over the years, and I've read and whatnot, that see that joint just down the very bottom there that looks like a flexi joint? It's just an expansion piece on these headers. So I can't really get the torch in a position because I've got one hand holding the camera. So that right there is often a cause of problems on these things in terms of exhaust manifold leaks, but you can see that there's nothing on that that would tell me that there's been a leak. But up here, oh, just got some dirt in my eye. How good is that? And a bit more. Up here it looks a lot more suspicious with those very dodgy welds, and I think that that's where our problem is. Alrighty, so that's not ideal. Obviously it's taken me a little bit of time to get the heat shield off there. I'll turn you around and you can have a bit of a look from the top. What you can see here are these factory headers, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about what we're going to do from here. Okay, so what you see here, they are factory P38 Range Rover headers. That's what the P38 is coming with. So there's that expansion, well, it's not an expansion joint, I guess it's just a little flex joint, I guess, that I was talking about before. And those little bolt looking things there, that's what holds the heat shield on. And it's good to see that up here there's no visible signs of exhaust gases getting out. So the manifold gasket itself is okay, but in order to repair this pipe I'm going to have to remove these headers. Unfortunately, it's something that I didn't want to have to do, but I'm going to have to do that. Now I can't see anything with the torch up here that would signify a leak, but you can see the discoloration on the exhaust pipe. The further down you get, right down in there towards where the all that dodgy welding is. So yeah, I'm gonna have to pull these out, unfortunately. Alright, so as you saw just there, I'm gonna have to remove that exhaust manifold, those headers, and go and see if we can just do some welding touch-ups. Now I'm not going to do that because I can't weld. I can weld enough to get me out of trouble, but for that job there, for something that I don't want to have to do 100 more times, I'm going to put that in the hands of someone who knows how to weld. Alright, new day, and we're back on the P38 exhaust system here. So obviously, like everything in my life, I can only do bits and pieces. I've got a couple of hours here and there. Today I've got a few extra hours, so I've let the car cool down. The previous day, yesterday, I managed to get the heat shield off the exhaust. Now I need to get the manifold off, so I'll show you what we've got so far. Okay, so we're at the stage now where we're taking the heat shield off the back of the exhaust headers. See, these are factory headers, they're pretty cool, and they're in good nick here. Just looking at it, they're not rusty or anything. I believe they're stainless. Anyway, the hardest part, I've got the little bolts out that hold these in. The hardest part is actually getting that out so that I can access the bolts for the headers. So what I thought I'd do is remove my wheel and my wheel arch liner, and you can see in here there is great access to all of the bolts, bar that very front one for the first header, which I'll have to do from the engine bay. There's the expansion joint that commonly in these things actually goes and creates an exhaust leak, but that's not the case here. So I can get in and I can get to all of these bolts from here, which I will do, and I'll get back to you in a sec. Alright, so this is the inside, the inner heat shield. And I've had a bit of a play around so far to try and get these headers out, but this has sort of always been the interference, so I thought I'd get that out. It was a little bit of a juggle, but about 20 minutes work, and I've managed to finally get this thing out. Alright, here we go, here's a little something for you. So you can see a small crack there. You can see someone's done a real dodgy repair on this thing in the past. If I flip it over, there's our problem right there that I picked up. It's only a very small crack, but it's only going to get bigger. So I need to repair that. Usually this is the problem on a P38 Range Rover, but this is intact and looking good. There's been no exhaust leaking from that. So now I have to get this off, grind out all this old dodgy weld and repair it. Alright, so we've got that exhaust headers off getting repaired. Obviously I'm not a welder, so I can't just go and cut it out and weld it up. So I've got it off to my guy, the same guy that made that stainless snorkel, funny enough. So he's going to neaten that up and fix up the welds, because that is actually, the headers are actually stainless on this thing. So yeah, there you go. Anyway, I've got my special tool now, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean up the surface there where the manifold meets the head, and make sure that's all good to go. that's all I can really do at the moment until I get the call to say that the headers are all repaired and ready to go back. Once they're ready to go back, I'll come back in and put them on. I had a funny chat with him actually. I was talking about putting that heat shielding on that exhaust, that manifold, and he advised not to do that because of the way that the stainless heats up and expands and contracts with temperature. He said he'd probably end up blowing a lot of holes in the manifold there if I was to do that with the exhaust wrap that I was going to do. So he said the best thing you can do is probably stick with what they've already put on there, which is that shielding to try and keep the heat out of the engine bay as such, and at least guide it out of the exhaust rather than wrap it up altogether. So that's what I'm going to do now. Clean this up, basically prep everything else that I can prep, and get it ready so that when I do get that phone call, I can go and get them and put them straight back in. All right, so I got most of the junk off the head there where the exhaust manifold bolts on, looking pretty good. So the old scraper did me some favors. It was really good. But there's something that I'm going to do now. Once I've got everything off with the scraper, I'm going to move on to using this little brass toothbrush, if you will, and combine that with a bit of wax and grease remover. Now I'm not going to try and use this to dig holes in the head because that's the last thing you want is to score it, but it's soft enough that it shouldn't do that, being brass. And I'm just going to lightly take off all of the other stuff that I couldn't get off with a scraper, and the wax and grease remover obviously keeps the surface nice and clean, so that when I go to put on the new gasket, we've got a nice clean surface that's still level and it's not all kinds of wonky, and then we don't end up with leaks from that gasket. And here we have the finished product after a little bit of wax and grease remover and that little brush. So you can see they're looking quite clean now. You don't have to be 100% anal about it, but you want to get it mostly clean, and obviously you don't want to dig into it or score those surfaces there. You want to try and keep them as smooth and as flat as you can. So that's come up quite good. Very happy with that. Here we are. So I've got it back. These holes have been fixed up. There's another one that was around the other side that's also been fixed up. And there's a big long strip of weld up here that was ground out and fixed up as well. So it's sort of like, unfortunately, he's had to work on someone else's work to make it happen, but it'll do the job for now. So now we get the job of reinstalling. As you'll see, I've cleaned all of the surfaces here on the head where the manifold goes on. So that's all ready to go. Now I've just got to do the manifold itself, and you can see that's going to take a little bit of work, and we're running out of daylight here, so I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to try and film as I go, but I guess the long and short of it is it's going to go back in the same way that it came out. I'm going to put the heat shields on. As we discussed, I'm not going to use the wrap, the exhaust wrap heat shield stuff. I'm going to use the stuff that was already on it, and see how we go. So I'll try and get some footage as I go before the sun goes down. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you can't hardly see that, but that is one set of exhaust headers. It's starting to get a little bit dark out here. That took me about 15 or 20 minutes to negotiate to get it up in there. So now we just got to get the heat shield to go in with it, because they sort of work together. And then I can connect that rear heat shield, and then I can put the manifold up on the head. Okay, so with a bit of light on, you can see we've got this heat shield in here now with the manifold. I remember getting that out. It actually took me about half an hour. It only took me about 5 minutes to get it in now, obviously without breaking it. Now I know it looks pretty vicious down here, but I did not do that. It was already like that. So I just tried to nurse it in, make sure I didn't damage it. And now it's got two of these, which would attach it to the engine side of that manifold of the headers. So I'll do that, and then I can somehow slide in the other set after I bolt up these headers. So have you ever heard a Range Rover V8 straight out of the headers? No exhaust, no cats, no anything? We'll have a go, eh? All right, here we go. All right, so the mission of getting it back in, that's all done. That was fun, trying to do that without breaking anything. I'll show you what we're up to. So we're all back in now, nice and neatly. I'll move my torch, the sun's just gone down. So it's all back in as it should be. I didn't end up going with the wrap as I talked about, the exhaust wrapping, because apparently that, when used with stainless steel headers, actually causes them to crack because they heat up, they get quite red hot, was the exact words that were used with me. Anyway, there's only one thing left to do now, so we're all back on. I've checked everything in here. I've got the exhaust bolted back up to both sets of headers and the main thing. I've got the guard back in. We got to get the key and make this thing run and see if we've got any leaks. Here it goes. Sounds good, sounds nice and quiet. So that's a win right there. Not hearing any leaks. Beautiful. All right, so job done. It took a little bit, and the big weight for me was actually getting the headers repaired. The stainless steel obviously needs a little bit of welding, someone who knows what they're doing, and I'm glad I didn't tackle that one myself. But if this is the first time you're doing this job, there's a couple of things you might want to know. So the first thing you want to know is the actual bolts that hold the headers to the engine block are 12-point sockets, so you're going to need 12-point sockets if you're going to take them off. The rest of them, there's varying different sizes. It was easy for me once I took the inner guard off that front wheel, and I also took the exhaust from the cats back to the next join section underneath the car, which also made it easy to remove the headers and to remove the inner heat shield. The outer heat shield had to come up through the top, but the other two came out through the bottom. So there's a few things there that you might want to remember next time you tackle this job. Take your time. It's a lot longer than just doing it on a normal four-wheel drive for some reason. It took me quite some time to do this job, but that was in aid of not wanting to actually break anything. So we got everything back in and working and bolted up, and there's no rattles, and that was a successful job. So if you're going to tackle it, good luck and all the best. Don't forget, comment down below if you want a hand. If you're doing this job and you want some advice, let me know and I'll sing out. And you can head over to Chilling with Keithy as well if you want to get into contact with me. Thanks guys, take care, and we'll see you next time.